Now we broke down the keys to the series for the Celtics. Now let's get into the Mavs. Chaz, what do you think the biggest keys are for a Mavs victory in his NBA Finals?
Yeah, so I'll go right off of what you just mentioned with Kyrie Irving. I thought we really saw him in that Thunder series not be nearly as aggressive as he needs to be. I think he averaged about 16 points in that series and only like 6 points in the first half throughout that series. And then I thought we saw in game one of the Timberwolves series, he really made a point to be aggressive. I believe he had like 24 points in game one in the first half. In I believe 4 out of the 5 games, he scored 30 points at least against the Timberwolves. So if he's able to keep at that pace from the Western Conference Finals and not what we saw in the round before that, I think that's going to be really key for the Mavericks. Sticking with their two-headed duo at the top alongside with Luca, I think he has to be the best player in this series. I mean, we all believe that that's who he is. He's better than Tatum. He's better than Brown. He's the best player out there. If he can continue to do that and be the best player, then I think they got a legitimate shot. We're going to see. I think there is a scenario where even if Luca does go off, maybe Boston can still find a way to win if they're able to limit the other guys. So I'll go into saying that I also think the role players for the Mavericks have to be good. We don't need PJ Washington to be scoring 20, 25 points like he was against the Thunder, but if he can hit open shots, if him and Derrick Jones and Josh Green and Jaden Hardy and those type of guys can hit open shots when they get them, I think that's going to be really key. And then one more thing that I'll mention before we go to you is that these wing defenders must keep Brown and Tatum in check. I mean, we know that they're going to score 20, 25, 30 points per game, but they have to make it hard on them. PJ Washington is likely going to be guarding Jason Tatum. Derrick Jones Jr. is probably going to be guarding Jalen Brown or vice versa. Those guys are going to have to play at a really high level and at least make Brown and Tatum work. Because if Brown and Tatum are able to get off offensively and have a little bit of effectiveness on defense, then I think the Celtics probably end up winning this series. So I think these role players for the Mavericks are going to be really key. I mean, for me, Boston, I kind of trust their role players a little bit more. Drew Holiday, Derek White, Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford, those are about as good of role players as you can get. So if PJ Washington and Derek Jones Jr. and Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford, the bigs as well, if those guys can close that gap a little bit, then I think the Mavericks got a chance to steal it. What do you think are the keys for Dallas?
Let me ask you this before I get into the keys, and because you brought up an interesting point that is not on our rundown, but I wanted to ask you because it kind of went off in my head.
Yeah.
If these two teams, their superstars, are playing at their best, at their apex, who do you favor? So I'm talking Luca, Kyrie, they're playing at their apex. Brown, Tatum, they're playing at their apex. I think if all four of those guys are playing at their apex, I believe Dallas is the better team. I believe they have a better chance to win this finals if all four of them are playing at the best we've seen all four of them play. I think Dallas should be favored in that aspect.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and that's why I think the role players are so important because most likely
Mhm,
the stars are going to do what they do. I mean, we might see Tatum
mhm.
struggle on a game here or there, or maybe Kyrie doesn't have the efficiency. We saw him struggle in game four against the Timberwolves, but then he came right back in game five. We might get one game here or there, maybe a half here or there where the stars aren't up to their level, but most times the stars do what they do, and you need the role players to step up. That's why I think these role guys and like I said, I tend to trust Boston's role players a little bit more. I think they could end up deciding the series.
Okay, gotcha. And so keys for the match for me was again, it's some stuff that we already mentioned. I mentioned the backcourt dynamics and the backcourt domination. Luca and Kyrie, if they display dominance in the backcourt that really if Boston can't contend with, then Dallas should win this series and it should and really win the series rather easy. If you have Luca going for 40, 45 points, and you got Kyrie going for 30, 40 points, it's going to be hard for Boston to keep up with that type of scoring. I'm not saying Boston can't because Boston is more than capable of scoring head to head with the Dallas Mavericks. But if you have Luca and Kyrie both combining for 70, 80 points, that's hard to overcome if you're Boston. So they need to be able to limit, not, you're not going to limit the volume of the way that they're shooting, but you can make it hard for them to score easy points in the paint. You can make it really hard on them. And that's going to be really important in this series. Also, I wrote down Luka shooting percentage from the three. Luka's shooting in the 20s, the ballparks of the 20s. Last series, he's shooting about 20-ish% from the 3-point line right now. And so he hasn't really been that productive from the 3-point line. If that increases to the 30s, to 35, to even 41, 42%, it's going to be really hard for Boston to win this series if Luka's clicking on so many series. We know Luka and Kyrie are both big shot takers and big shot makers. So if Luka is clicking on all cylinders, I believe he's shooting high 20s, maybe from the 3-point line. If he could shoot in the high 30s, low 40s, then Boston is in deep trouble because that means that Luka is in his bag. That means Luka's hitting on all cylinders, all elements. You're already not going to stop him from, scoring completely, but to also have him in his bag from the 3-point line, that's going to be hard for Boston to contend with. So they have to be able to do a good job defensively on Luka in order to be successful in this series. Lastly, again, I mentioned Kyrie struggles against the Wolves. He cannot come out slow in this series. He cannot have the first halves that he's had previously in the Western Conference Finals that he had. He cannot have in an NBA Finals. It's going to be hard for Dallas to be able to maintain leads if they have them, and also for Luka to be able to score at the volume he needs to score while he's still dealing with nagging injuries. We don't know how healthy he is. And for Kyrie to have the first halves that he's had in the NBA Finals, that's a recipe for disaster if I'm Boston. Actually, I'm sorry, if I'm Dallas. It's a good if I'm Boston, but it's a disaster if I'm Dallas.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Kyrie and Luca need to play similar to what they did in that Western Conference Finals. I think I had that written down that, yeah, according to ESPN, Luca and Kyrie became the first backcourt duo in over 50 years to score 30 plus points each in a single playoff run. If they can do that another, two or three times, then I think they're going to win the series.
They win the series, absolutely. Is
That's
there anything else you wanted to add for the keys here?
yeah, I did have one more written down for the Mavericks, and then we can
I
move on. That I think Boston will likely win the 3-point advantage. We've seen
think so too.
they are the best 3-point shooting team in
Yeah.
the league. They take a lot of them, they make a lot of them. I'm not saying that Dallas needs to win that matchup, but if they can keep it close, then I think that will be key. We can't, we saw in game one, I believe, against the Timberwolves, the Mavericks, they really struggled from three, and the Timberwolves made the most that they made all season. If we see them play defense like that, and Boston is taking a lot of open shots and they're knocking them down because they have really good 3-point shooters. I mean, their entire starting five can hit it from deep, plus Al Horford, Peyton Pritchard off the bench as well. They have a lot of great 3-point shooters. So if they're clicking on all cylinders and they're knocking down shots from the perimeter, then I think Dallas is either going to have to step it up on defense or they're going to have to match that on their offensive end.
And see, this is the part I'm going to disagree with you on because Boston tends to fall in love with that 3-point line.
Yeah.
Even if they're missing a high volume of threes. They're they're more of a 3-point shooting team than they are of a team that they should be, which is feeding Porzingis, going in the paint because you got so many mismatches that you have throughout the regular season that you could take advantage of that. Play inside out, dump it into Porzingis. A man is destined to be open from the 3-point line. Play that way. But Boston likes to come down the court and jack up threes. And if that's going to be their strategy for this series, I love it if I'm Dallas.